So we're recording. We're here with our normal weekly get together on 4D stuff. And I was going through this document that I've said several times came out of our meeting in Berlin. And I think where I closed off the last time, we had an intermediate recording dealing with how to use the online tools, which I think is really important stuff. And now pick up again with the context shifting worksheet. And I sort of thought about this when I was working as a consultant. The company that I was mostly working for, TRW, the people there were smart. That's why I liked them. They were almost gifted talent. Sort of a small for aerospace high tech company in Redondo Beach, California. And what I realized was that whenever they call me, it was always with a problem they couldn't solve, because if they could solve it, they weren't going to pay me. So I tried to think about how to solve unsolvable problems, and it occurred to me that if you can change the way you see the problem, or as Einstein put, you can't solve a problem with the level of thinking that created it, could you change the context of the problem? So I was pondering how to do this, and I said, well, that's kind of what the workshop does, so why don't I put the workshop down in one single piece of paper? So I started working with this and got remarkable results. And then early on, one of the things that people said to me was, we don't want a generic workshop. We don't have time for that. What we want is to work on a workshop that's tuned to us. So the first thought I had was, that's quite impossible. I can't do that. I can't make a new workshop for a team. Then it might have been a comment by Frank that triggered this. I'm not sure. But I said, why don't I just put the context shifting worksheet in the middle of the workshop? And if we do that, we're doing exactly what they want. So all the material in the workshop goes through this process where they pick a situation that's troubling them. And that's the hardest part. The situations that work for this typically involve some kind of human interaction. And that's kind of the essence of the 4D system. It's about how humans interact. It's intended to complement technical learning. And but most of the time we come up with this pretty easily. And I've already talked about this. The way I like to do this is with a nominal group technique process, where people I solicit candidates from the floor and write them on flip charts. And then we group them together in what are called affinity groups in that work. Then people vote on them. And I like the voting. I've talked about this quite a bit, that I find people will not vote for what they'll argue for. And so when the voting comes out, I watch and see, yes, this person argued for that, but didn't vote for it. So we pick the situation. That's the hardest part of this. The second thing we do is ask them to move to outcome. What outcomes do they want? And what's interesting about this is they generally underdo this. So I'm often prompting them to make it bigger. What's bigger? And then we look at the red storylines that are in play. And people have no problem coming up with these. It's usually blaming and complaining, which people are quite able to do. Then we look at the emotions that's triggering, because if you look at this dynamic of attitude being so crucial to everything, it's a combination of storylines and emotions, and you can shift the storylines. I don't know any way to change emotions on demand. If I say feel happy, feel sad, feel remorse, probably nothing happens for you. If I say imagine a mountain, imagine the ocean, imagine a city, your mind can do that, I think. So the issue is the thought part of our mind. We can change quite readily and quite quickly. And if you change that, the emotions will follow. So next thing we do is we talk about the shifting with green storylines. We change the emotions, and then we just go through the 8 behaviors. This is a misprint here. By the way, I had a big problem with this computer. OneDrive installed itself on my C drive, doubling the space and running me out of disk space. And I don't know how this happened because it's not supposed to be about that. In the process of cleaning that up, I deleted all my files. So I had to go back to what I had backed up on disk a couple months ago. I could restore most of my things because, ironically enough, most of the new things that are important I emailed to somebody. So I could find those in the old emails and restore it. But the some things are a month or two old. Anyway, so the 8 behaviors address authentic appreciation, address shared interests, appropriately include others, rigorously keep agreements, address unfortunate realities with 100% commitment, avoid drama, and clarify and communicate roles, accountability, and authority. This is a pretty comprehensive set of behaviors, covers the 4 dimensions with 2 behaviors each. And out of this, we get to action items, which we summarize. Then the final step is to evaluate whether this is going to work or not. And if people aren't convinced it's going to work, then I'd go back and do run some of this deeper. So you can do this in about an hour. And one of my master certified coaches though she's trained for some 2,000 hours in coaching or something, she found that the context shifting worksheet was more useful than anything she ever did in coaching. and so, excuse me, I find this very useful. And people who've done the workshop, like I've got one team at JPL done the workshop like 15 times. They all do this as a matter of course. When they get to a problem, they sit down, do the context shifting worksheet. So I don't know any other tool like this, and it invariably gives new insights and new courses of action that you hadn't thought about. Have any of you played with this at all?
I have.
Good for you, Nick.
Yeah, for me,
Unfortunately, it's been more in the solo context, not as much in team, but it's been very helpful.
The coaching that does this, it's one-on-one coaching, people working their problems. So I had a, when I was in China, they're very skeptical, and I love that about them because I like skeptics. I like the idea of being skeptical. I'm skeptical, and they'd ask me to do this while we're riding in a car someplace. And I remember one occasion he had a question. He wanted to decide whether to expand the company into another outlet in Xi'an. It was a Beijing-based company. And I said, well, here's what we're going to do. I'm not sure that's a context shifting worksheet action, but let's just go anyway. So sure enough, we started into it, and I said, this isn't the right way to do this. A decision like that, you're better off to use this methodology where you surface the criteria and then use the criteria, and I've talked about this a couple of times in a matrix form to make the decision. But what this is really, really useful for is if you do decide to open this satellite office in Xi'an, this will help it be successful by building relationships with clients, high functioning team, and all that. So I may have told this story before, but I don't think repetition in this stuff, a lot of material here hurts too much. I got great insight when in the first 7 or 8 years in China, I took questions from the floor. And I finally decided that that's a waste of time. Mostly it's the same 5% of blue people trying to show off. And instead, I only took questions during the break. And that made the workshops much, much faster. But in that time, I had a participant ask me a question that I already answered twice. And it was annoying to me. I had said nothing more I can say about this. I've answered this in 2 different ways. That's all I've got. So I went back to the hotel and I did an emotional check-in. So I think it's useful to make a habit of this. How are you feeling? And if you're not feeling good, you're probably in a drama state. So I felt myself, I first named it annoyed, then I named it frustrated, which I realized is a nice word for angry. So then I said, what's the red storyline that's powering that? The, the red storyline I was running is he was probably playing with his phone when I explained this the first two times. Phones in Chinese workshop are a major problem. They are addicted to phones in a way that almost like no place else. And then I realized that there was no basis in reality for this. It was my assumption that he's playing with his phone. And the fact that I blamed him was a blaming behavior. So by definition, it's a red storyline. So the result was bad feelings on both our parts, and I never helped him. So I asked myself, what is a green storyline I can replace it with to help me move into responsibility? And empathy and accountability is the easy way to do this. So empathy, he's trying his best to learn, and accountability is my duty to help him. So now I felt good, energized glad group and love group emotions, and then formulated a cheerful explanation, which I delivered the following morning. The outcome was we all felt good, and he deepened his understanding. This is an important process. Everybody got this down? How you do this? How are you feeling? Check in. If you're feeling good, great. If you're feeling lousy,
very important. Very important.
You're probably in a drama state.
Yeah, quite an example to follow, and it's presenting itself often when you work with people.
I think I'm constantly, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like to me, one of the things that um, I, I mean, when we're right now working on a major project, and I have a number of managers involved in doing that. So that's the phrase that I use most often. Like, make requests, do not make complaints.
Yep.
Right? So turn your complaints into requests.
Yep.
Because in my mind, like when you start saying to someone, what is it that they haven't done right, and how is it wrong, and how it's affecting you, it just immediately puts them on defense.
Yep.
But
Yep.
if you say, okay, well, we actually need this, and that, it almost empowers the other side.
Yep.
Because they feel that you are trusting them that they can do it. So can they really do it or not? That's a question, but at least in my mind, my goal is that by the way we are addressing the situation, we are not making it worse.
Exactly.
And we can make it much worse if you just pinpoint and you start blaming them, then they go on defense and you're getting nowhere, and everyone just getting more and more upset.
So early on, I had kind of a partner in this thing, and what he used to say is, it's a real bitch working with real people. So yeah, I this is something that bitch. By the way, I got this basic idea from my somatic psychology people, but they never had the thought about the storyline. What they showed me was that if you're feeling lousy, you're probably in a drama state. But they didn't have any method to exit it that ever worked very well, other than acknowledging that was helpful. So anyway, so good enough. Move on. So an example from the workshops,
Sorry, Charlie, I was struggling to get off mute.
Yeah, sure.
Two things. Darinka, I thought you were trying to add something to the context shifting worksheet. Wanted to make sure that whatever.
No.
Okay.
I'm done. Good, thank you. But thank you.
Okay. And then the second was a question about shifting to green storylines, because I've heard you, I think we've all heard you say this a lot. Use empathy and accountability. I think I was misconceptualizing the accountability part. So the example that you just used was you have empathy for the other and hold yourself accountable.
That's it. Yep.
Is that always
exactly
how it works?
I think that's it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I always think I was applying both to the other, and it's like, well, it
No,
wasn't working very well.
Thank you
Obviously.
for that clarification. No, it's what are you accountable for?
Okay. Empathy for them, accountability to yourself.
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
super helpful. I don't know
Thank
why I
you.
didn't
Thank
pick
you.
that up
No, that's good.
before.
And what Darinka was talking about was the exit strategy for victim, and that's I didn't explicitly talk about that case, but that's exactly what's in the context shifting worksheet. You feel uh, typically powerless, and it's a place of low energy, and you find yourself complaining. And what you do is you turn complaints into requests to exit that drama state. So she's talking about an application that uses exactly the context shifting worksheet in the example of the exiting the victim state. So good. So I did a lot of work with safety and mission assurance in NASA, and big reason for that was the head of safety and mission assurance, a former astronaut who I'd never really met. I went in and talked to him about this work, and he got it immediately. And he had me come and speak at his annual meetings of all the safety and mission assurance directors. And he's a smart guy. He understood that they had to deal with the social aspect of quality. That he really embodied the idea that I've brought forward, that's kind of unique to this work, that all these disasters, whether it's Fukushima or the Max or the Challenger explosion, have their roots in the social context, not the technical part, which is what the technical people are trained to believe. So I did probably more work with these organizations than anybody. And typically, the NASA, they've got to get their money from the flight projects. So the safety and mission assurance people go and negotiate with the flight projects. And of course, the flight project is trying to lower the cost. And that doesn't, it's kind of like I had to pay $20,000 for a building permit to pay for the inspectors for this house. And if someone had said to me, if we cut the cost in half and you had half as many inspections, would that be okay with you? And I'd say, sure. I don't need more inspections. I need more quality built in. So a common complaint that I would hear from them in the workshop was the support, the projects say they're too expensive. So I asked them, well, what emotion do you get? Well, it makes them angry. And they named it as frustration, because what they think they're trying to do the right thing, and the projects are under cost pressure, and that it's easier to go cut their cost than costs of core things that they've got to buy. So I said, what storyline are you running when you hear them say that to you? And they said, I'm tired of dealing with these ungrateful idiots. It's hopeless. So the minute you see the word hopeless, they've plunged into victim. And the problem with all these drama states is not only does it make you feel lousy, it takes away your capacity to act. So in victim, there's nothing you can do, so you do nothing. So I asked them, can you shift to a green storyline to exit drama and move into responsibility and empathy and accountability? This stimulated a storyline. They're under cost pressure, and that's the empathy part. I need to be sensitive to that. And the accountability part, I must explain our cost value proposition more clearly. So you're quite right in that. The accountability is you becoming accountable. Thank you for clarifying that. And now they felt energized, glad, and they went immediately to have a meeting with the project manager. And once they said, we understand the cost pressure, the conversation goes better. And let me explain how we're trying to control the costs that we're going to ask you to pay for, and how we're sensitive to minimizing these, and a very, sensible conversation. But what I want you to see is that when you got the red storyline running, you just can't do anything. And this is not hard to just stop, notice this, shift, and have a useful conversation. Thoughts, comments? Here's another one. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Charlie.
Oh,
I keep struggling to get off mute.
yeah.
The thing that's kind of amazing to me is I'm starting to visualize the 40 system as kind of a column
Mm-hmm.
with kind of the colors, and I'm not quite sure what the first level is, but everything is so impressively deep. And I don't know, it just feels like every time we review this, we've been doing this for more than a year now. I learned something new. I picked some other little nuance up, and it's like, how do you summarize this into something quickly digestible? And
I've never been
I
able
don't
to
think
make
it's
an
possible.
I've never been able to make an elevator speech for this.
Yeah, it's just
But at the same
really
time,
simple,
isn't it
but
simple?
complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's simple, but on the surface it's very simple, but when you really go to apply it, there's just such depth to it. And yeah, I just am constantly amazed at the little nuancy things that I pick up every time we talk.
Well, I mentioned the Chinese questions. I love most of their questions because it lets me start to show off the depth of the material. So if I just say these words, it doesn't come through, and they ask me about it, like you're asking, we start to bore into it. And yeah, I think the whole thing's a lot of fun.
It is, and I'm
I
thinking
add
about. Oh,
something?
sorry. Go ahead, Nico. Yeah, go ahead.
No, finish, Matt. No problem.
I'll be super quick. Just reflecting on my most recent experience at the solar panel installations. Like, I did a lot of this stuff, but if I had, not that anything would change the outcome,
Yeah.
there were things that I could have, like, there were crumbs that were left on the table because I wasn't fully implementing this process and system in the way it can be. So it's just fascinating that, I've improved in a lot of ways, and I feel really great about that. But then I can continue to see areas for improvement and growth.
You know, when I started doing these workshops, what I realized was that I was a participant in the workshop. I was not just a presenter because it's going in my brain. And I noticed myself changing over about the first 6 or 7 of these, something like that. And then I kind of stabilized out. But it's, you're fighting with a lifetime of experience, and it takes some time to internalize this. That's just how it works.
Yeah, I just shared with Charlie, but I'm applying these principles now for many years, but I haven't made $1 or €1 out of it yet.
Or what's
But
your or 1 rand? What's your currency?
yeah, 1 rand. But $1 is 20 rand, by the
Okay.
way. €1 is 20 rand, rounded off. But anyway, the project I have coming up is to bring together 16 people from seven countries in Europe, bring them together with the guys that I'm working with in townships in South Africa, grassroots, black young youth, and then also 10 white youth. This is South Africa. We always work with black and white, but bring them all together, take them on a hike in nature. You can just imagine how many times you will have to apply this green lines, red lines, and the 8 behaviors, and so much scope for it. It's like a circus. It's like a ballpark going for the fences.
I can see that. Yeah. On your feet.
Hmm.
So we're going to continue with these examples from real workshops. And this is one that most people easily relate to. Our management assigns us far more work than we can possibly do. I've had this experience. Haven't you all had this experience? I mean, when I worked for this administrator guy, I got a call at 2 a.m. Woke me up. He said, I want an op-ed on the space station to publish in the space news by noon. And I'm like, what? So I got out of bed, started working on it, did the best I could with it. It got published. And after that, I took the phone off the hook when I went to bed. So I couldn't reach you last night. I said, yeah, there's something wrong with the phone. I'll see what I can do. And began looking for another job. So anyway, I asked people how they felt. And of course, this frustrated word is very common. Again, that's a nice word for angry. And what's the storyline that they're running? Well, management won't listen. They don't care about our well-being. I can flatten. Let that ring. I can flat guarantee that's the case. But I ran it, and when I ran that, my statement to myself was, "That's the truth." And I think so so the problem is that's victim and blamer. That's victim that they won't listen and don't care, and the blamer is it's about them. This is a double play drama state, and the problem is that if you're in that storyline, you do nothing. I did what I had to do, but I wasn't going to do it again. And the other problem is bad feelings. I mentioned at the end of my little statement on this that I began looking for another job. I don't like this being unreasonable demands. So empathy and accountability. I did not know this back then. I did not run it, but in the workshops, people seem to get this. They're overloaded too. Management. At least back when I worked at NASA, management was not a place to relax. It was probably the most demanding jobs, and you've all been in management jobs, I think. Second, I can help them understand the situation, and that's the accountability part. I'm accountable for communicating what's going on here, and so now openly and honestly communicate with the result of a deeper understanding. So there it is, simple as can be, yet deep as can be.
Yep.
So I've probably told this story before, but I married someone I probably never should have, and someone said every divorced person says that. That's nothing new, but by definition. But it was a very odd time in my life. Not going to talk too much about that, but anyway, it was so I said I want a divorce, and she said, "Why do you want a divorce?" Because I love you. And I said, because I don't feel loved. So I went to a psychotherapist and asked about this. And she said, well, what does your wife appreciate about you? And I said, well, she likes that I'm reliably there for the family. We live in an expensive waterfront house that I managed to buy and remodel. I have a prestigious job. I make good income. I take care of everything. And so the therapist said, what do you appreciate about yourself? I said, my creativity, my ability to influence the path of space astrophysics, love of physics, unconventional hobbies, racing sailboats. What does she think about these things? Well, she doesn't like any of them. She has no use for them. In fact, she criticizes me for all these things. So what she said is what the problem you got is that she doesn't appreciate anything that you appreciate about yourself. And therefore, it doesn't register. And so looking back on this years later, she was orange and I'm blue. So I think this is an important lesson to appreciate people for things they appreciate about themselves. So I was the only person that I know, that's not true, that probably one of two or three, maybe be more close. I don't know that well. One of a few, but very few could communicate with this NASA administrator. And I understood intuitively back then we're both blues. I didn't have the term blue, but I read a book, I think it was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, that showed me
Wow.
that the power of being an intuitive. Until I read that book, I was always sort of confused because it was anomalous to me that I could understand quite readily the really complex concepts in physics like relativity and quantum mechanics. But I had a really hard time doing the detailed calculations. And it bothered me. So I felt like a flaw that I'm going to be discovered one day for this. Then I got it that I was basically an intuitive, and that's how I labeled him, not blue, but intuitive. And I talked to him in that way in the conversation first. And so he liked me because we related. So appreciate people for things they appreciate about themselves. Comments, thoughts?
It's
Lots
harder
of
to do
thoughts.
than at least in my experience. I found it much harder to accomplish well.
Yeah.
But yeah, half the battle is trying to figure out what color they are. I'm getting better at that. But then you have to, figure out how that applies to them and what
I think the lever here is gratitude. So the behavior you want is to speak these words, or even better, I discovered that actually gestures are more important than words. So this morning I took the trash down and down to the street, and Junko was there with a late offering from the kitchen, handed it to me, and said, "Do you need my help?" I said, "No." Then when I stepped in the elevator, she stopped and waved briskly and smiled, and sort of made my day. So that was bigger than anything she could have said. So we'll do it with gestures. And if you're lost in doing this, it's the mindset. It's AMBR, attention, mindset, behavior, action. Go to what you're grateful about with this person. And if you can't be grateful about anything, then it's time for a different course of action. But go to what you're grateful for. What we're doing here is we're plowing old ground with new applications, I think, or repeat applications. And it's really a fact that none of us learned from the first exposure to anything. It just doesn't work that way. It takes repetition. So,
right.
comments, thoughts? Make sense?
No, this is great. I'm just eating it up. Thank you.
So,
And you know what is, it's also for me, not when you talk about, well, I'm trying to figure out what someone's color is. I find that in any human relationship, if I invest the time and get to know the person, that that pays off. So just about anything, right? Just about like the job that I do, I often have to go and say no to people or tell them that that's a wrong way, and then now got in trouble and see how, right? So it's there are many unpleasant moments. What I learn is that anybody new coming to the organization, I invest the time to get to know them. And then I tell them about things. And then
nice.
if down the line, if I have to have a difficult conversation, I have some capital to draw on.
Yeah.
Because it did happen to me early in the career several times that my first encounter with someone was when they were like they've done something really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go and discuss that with them and explain the consequences, tell them that now their boss will be informed about it and there needs to be discipline and all that. And I thought, wow, what a way to know someone. What a wrong way to know someone. What
Yeah,
do I
right.
do so I never have to just get to know someone for the first time under those circumstances?
I think the corollary is build relationships before you need them.
Yeah.
Hmm? The way I used to use that was that all the Congress appropriates money. That's the only place government gets money in the U.S., the Congress. And I got to know the staffers. So every congressperson, Senate or House has one or two or three or four staff people, just like Supreme Court justices have clerks. That's kind of their subordinates, and they do enormous amount of the work because someone's got to draft these bills. These members don't sit down and do that. The staff do it. They would look at it and maybe give them some instruction. I think same thing happens with the Supreme Court. The clerks read the amicus briefs. They read the law. They go talk to them about it, get some guidance, go back. So whenever I needed to get the budget I wanted, these staffers were more important than the members because they're in the details. So what I would do is whenever there's some good news, like for example, one of the scientists uh, made some kind of discovery of something, or published a paper, or won a big grant or something, I would go down and see the member and tell them the good news, not the member, the staffer. And the staffer would tell, I'd say, look, your member can call anytime before noon tomorrow, and no one from NASA will contact them. And so your member can call and get credit for this, like they did it. And so then when I had some terrible problem with money, I walk in the door and they're glad to see me, and they would take my problem on. Hmm. Okay, so appreciation. I had a very seminal part of my upbringing when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and there was a polio epidemic underway. And my parents thought that if I lived with my maternal grandparents, it would be safer for me than living in the military base they were stationed at. So I spent quite a bit of time with him, and he was a really interesting guy. He had immigrated to the U.S. and become a citizen from Germany, and he started off as working as basically a janitor in a company that he became the CEO of. And but he had this very Germanic thing. And I think I picked up from him that he believed people work best when they're stressed. This was reinforced by a supervisor who said, your people look too relaxed. So I ignored completely this idea of appreciation. That was something that I didn't think was useful. Then I attended a seminar by the authors of a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which nicely matches the four colors, orange, blue, green, and yellow, about the development of the male psyche, very Jungian idea. And in this workshop, I decided I was in the king archetype. I had a very big job, influencing millions of dollars, happy with my life, vigorous, healthy, etc. And what they said is the most legitimate function of the king was to bless the subjects. So a lot of this came from doing experiments. I'm an experimental physicist, and so in physics, as you know, experiment rules. If something doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong, no matter how clever it sounds. So experiments with people, to me, are the ultimate reality. So when I went back to work that following Monday, I imagined I was holding a scepter like a king would have, and blessing the people who came to meet with me. And so what I tried was, instead of my normal critical analysis, which I'm very easily able to do, I looked for something to appreciate that they had done. And the transformation was amazing. The division was energized as never before. Mutual respect increased, and people were willing to openly address unfortunate realities. This is a huge thing about addressing unfortunate realities. I was talking to a guy about getting backup power, and he said, well, I tend to be an optimist. And I said, yeah, that's fine. But if it interferes with addressing unfortunate realities, and The unfortunate reality is that we get frequent power outages here. There was no electricity up here for 8 hours on Saturday because of a snowstorm. And we just switched over to the battery, and I didn't even notice except that the lights blinked. So I said, if it interferes with the reality is this is going to happen more often. I think 500,000 people don't have electricity in California today. Nico, does it ever happen to a whole country? I've heard it does.
Yeah.
Rolling electricity. So I think that addressing unfortunate realities is just like a huge piece. So now it's a habit. So I think part of the reasons Junko and I are happy together is I look for opportunities to appreciate her, and there's lots of them. This is really powerful stuff.
You know what is, Charlie? You know what is interesting? When I attend classical music concerts or opera or any concert for that matter, it's really amazing how at the end there's that huge, big, great applause.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking last time I was there, I was kind of thinking, wow, what a way for them to end their workday. Right? The entire big hall full of people is applauding for several minutes. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
cheering. And I'm thinking, yeah, how does that? I'm also, and I'm thinking, what can I do to my people so that they feel cheered like that at the end of the day? Because these people get it every night.
Yeah, I'm even more impressed when I see conductors will often call out a few key people, and they stand briefly, and the audience roars, and then they take the trouble to make sure they call out everybody. Like they may have done the ones who do it right, in my opinion, will point to the two or three real soloists that made the whole piece work. And then they'll point. And by the way, those people will often uh, lift their hand to raise up the other people playing with them. Like if it's a solo clarinet and the person gets the applause, they'll raise their hand and have all the other clarinet people stand with them. And the audiences are smart because the level of the applause changes with how great it was. So, and by the way, it's the most underpaid profession in the world for the effort it takes to master it, I think. And I think that appreciation probably helps them keep doing that job. They're paid crap, and they've got to uh, travel and work these long rehearsal hours, and I couldn't do it. You know.
Yeah, it is certainly it is a demanding job for that matter. And I mean, yeah, I think I spoke about it before. It's also really astounding to me how does the conductor get them all to go in the same tune at the same time and start and stop. That's like to me lots to learn for on just like a management of that. And because I know I spoke with someone, well, the orchestra last time I saw, each one of them is an accomplished musician on
Yeah,
their own.
yeah.
And they spend years and years, like you see, this one attended that famous school, that one was trained
Yep.
by that one, this one carrying violin that cost that much money, the piano, the tuning of that piano cost like someone's salary. And you are like, okay, how do you now get all those big personalities to work together and start and stop at the same time?
Well, it's what's interesting is if you watch conductors, they've got the score of the whole thing. They've got broken out on one sheet of paper like 8 different instrument sets, and they've got to memorize basically the symphony to know at each part what matters most.
Yeah.
It's a very I'd love to have a half hour to conduct a symphony, just like I flew an airplane simulator, and just have the fun of waving my arms and everybody playing. But to do it correctly, it's another life practice. Yeah, there's the number of people who can conduct symphonies and do it well. It's small. In fact, you probably know the names of most of the people do this well. There's
Yeah.
not that many. There's
Correct.
not 1,000. there may be 50 in the whole world, conductors that are good enough that someone's willing to let them take over an orchestra. By the way, Leonard Bernstein did a series of YouTube videos, 5 of them on conducting, and he starts off with him conducting the orchestra and his playing, and then he stops conducting and walks away, and they keep playing, and no change. And he said, "So you don't need me." Then he goes and explains why you actually do. And it turns out that when orchestras were smaller, the first violin was also the conductor. We had a 10-person orchestra. You didn't have a conductor. The first violin did it. And that's why the first violin is so recognized today, that the conductor shakes their hand when they come on. But when the orchestras came, I think about the time of Beethoven, and they got to be 60, 80 people, you had to have a full-time person to not just keep them synchronized, but one hand of the right hand of the conductor is the beat, and the other hand is the volume. So they're going around and modulating the sound up and down of each section as it plays. Yeah, it's an incredible thing. Anyway, sorry I got off on a little tangent there, talking about classical music. Actually, it shouldn't be called classical music. It should be called Western music. There's actually much older music in Asia, but anyway. So I'm sure you know the story that I told about my friend Ron, and the fact that he was very supportive when I first went to the University of Colorado. And after I'd left the university for 10 years, his birthday popped up in my Outlook, and I told Junko it's time for a big appreciation exercise. And an English professor in a state university does not make a lot of money, and he used to show me, open his refrigerator door and show me he had a bottle of Cordon Rouge champagne. So I put two cases of Cordon Rouge on his porch with no note and left. And next day he called me and thanked me for it. And so I was telling that story in a workshop, and a guy in Shanghai said, Charlie, that's interesting, but you can do things like that. But I've got a wife, children, and her parents living in an apartment in Beijing, and I've got my own apartment here living in Shanghai and in Shanghai. And at the end of the month, I don't have 2 cents to rub together. China is not a cheap place. The rents in Shenzhen, which is the home of almost all the consumer electronics, are higher than Manhattan. So I started to think about that, and said, that's really an important thing. And that's when I sort of reflected and got that the gestures are more important than the words. So I thought about this, and what I really appreciate is the fact that when I'm going any place in an automobile in China, someone's with me. That they could put me in a car and tell the driver where to go, but they don't. They accompany me. When we get to the place, they insist on carrying my little case. I mean, it's no effort, but they want to carry it. They open the doors for me. This is big stuff, and this doesn't cost you anything. So look for opportunities to do things for Junko. I carry dishes to the sink. Her nature is she won't let me do it by myself. She'll do it with me, but I make sure that I tend to things like this. And anything she wants me to do, nearly anything, I do immediately and cheerfully. I read this seminal article many years ago about what correlated with happy marriage. And this was in the New York Times, and it said it has nothing to do with willingness to go to therapy together, has nothing to do with reading self-help books. The main thing is when the wife says do something, the husband says, yes, dear, and does it. So that's how it works here. Nat and Darinka, you want to comment on this?
I can confirm.
It's okay.
It is a human relationship, so for sure, yeah.
Just one comment.
Yes.
I know I've said this probably many times before, but emotional intelligence, I've learned from that. 90% plus communication is non-verbal.
Yep.
So what I usually do, it became a habit. like now in India with joining this group of global people, I will just do nothing. You know, I won't try to impress. I won't say anything. I'm a slow starter, everything, but I'm just focusing on, you know, my heart, the intention. Just focusing on it. It's not something you can force, but just analyze my presence, my attitude, you know, my spirit. And then from there, I will, you know, start participating.
Nice.
This is where all of this over the years have led me to.
Very good.
That's all.
I think we're gonna 2 minutes from wrapping up. Any final thoughts about today from anybody?
None for me.
No, thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for
Thank you
sharing all
all.
of this. Thank you, Nat and Nico. It's always amazing to hear.
Thank you very much.
Okay.